Before Ninja Gaiden became one of the most brutal and rewarding action games of its era, it was nearly something completely different. Back in 1999, Team Ninja kicked off what they called the next generation Ninja Gaiden Project. Originally planned for the Sega Dreamcast, the project had to find a new home after Sega bowed out of the console race. The team briefly considered the PlayStation 2, but once they saw what Microsoft's new Xbox could do, they made a bold move. Led by their ever-outspoken Tomonobu Itagaki, Team Ninja shifted the development once again, this time in secret. Then at E3 2002 they dropped a surprise. Ninja Gaiden will be an Xbox exclusive. This wasn't just a sequel, it was a reinvention. Team Ninja was stepping into the action game genre for the first time, and Itagaki wasn't interested in nostalgia for nostalgia's sake. Even though Tecmo pushed to tie the game back to the NES classics, still beloved in the West, Itagaki had his own vision. After revisiting the original titles, he realized what really made them tick: intensity, challenge and raw, violent flair. That DNA would carry over into the new game in full force, with brutal difficulty, fluid combat and plenty of decapitations. But this wasn't just about gore. Itagaki wanted to craft an experience that rewarded player skill, not memorization. That means tight, responsive controls, silky animation and enemies that will push players to their limits. The team studied real martial arts, used anatomical references for the models and reimagined classic moves and enemies with a modern twist. Even when working with motion capture, they didn't just copy the footage, they exaggerated it, stylized it and shaped it into something uniquely Ninja Gaiden. And finally, on March 2nd, 2004, their vision came to life. Set in the same universe as the Dead or Alive series, the game follows Ryo Hayabusa, the iconic ninja and returning protagonist from the original NES Ninja Gaiden trilogy. The game begins with Ryu infiltrating the Shadow Clan fortress to pay his uncle Murai a visit. Their reunion is shattered by news of a devastating raid on Hayabusa village. Rushing back, Ryu finds the village in ruins and confronts the mysterious warlord Doku, who has murdered Kuraha, the shrine maiden and Ryu's childhood friend. Wielding the stolen Dark Dragon Blade, Doku strikes Ryu down in a brutal encounter, but death does not claim him. Revived by a falcon, the sacred spirit of his clan, Ryu rises once more as a soldier of revenge. Determined to avenge Kuraha and reclaim the Dark Dragon Blade, Ryu learns from Murai that the attackers come from the Vigor Empire, hidden within the fortified city of Tyron. Unable to enter by conventional means, Ryu stows away aboard an airship bound for the Empire. Inside Terran, he finds the city teeming with hostile forces, the Vigor military, demonic beings known as fiends, and the ruthless Black Spider clan, rivals who also seek the Blade's power. Amid this chaos, Ryu meets Rachel, a fiend hunter on a personal mission to destroy Doku for turning her twin sister Elma into a greater fiend. Meanwhile, two shadowy figures, Gamoth and the Dark Disciple, begin to track Ryu's every move. Eventually, Ryu faces Elma in a devastating battle that leaves much of the city in ruins. He defeats her but spares her life, entrusting her to Rachel. However, Rachel cannot bring herself to kill her transformed sister. Doku captures Rachel and prepares to use her in a dark ritual to further empower Elma. But Elma breaks free of her curse, sacrifices herself to save Rachel, and Ryu destroys Doku's lingering spirit. With his final breath, Doku casts a blood curse upon Ryu, tainting his body and soul. The only way to lift it is to defeat the Holy Vigor Emperor himself. As Rachel mourns the loss of Elma, Ryu storms the heart of the Empire, battling through a volcanic abyss to confront the Emperor in a final showdown. When the Emperor falls, Ryu's curse is lifted, and the collapsing realms begin to crumble. Ryu escapes with the Dark Dragon Blade, only to lose his grip on it as he and Rachel ascend to the surface. The blade lands at the feet of the Dark Disciple, who reveals his true identity, Murai. He confesses to orchestrating the entire conflict, using Ryu to gather souls and restore the blade's dark power. Empowered by the blade, Murai transforms into a demonic being and attacks. In a final epic battle, Ryu defeats his uncle and destroys the Dark Dragon Blade using the True Dragon Sword. With his vengeance fulfilled, Ryu returns to the Hayabusa village. In the quiet aftermath, he visits Kuraha's grave and leaves behind the Dragon Eye, the key to his blade's power, before taking the form of a falcon and vanishing into the night. The story in Ninja Gaiden never managed to grab me. Despite its sleek and well-animated cutscenes, I found myself completely uninvested in the narrative. The plot felt hollow and the characters, even the main ones, lacked depth or personality. Ryo Hayabusa is the classic silent badass archetype, but that's where his character begins and ends. He has no discernible traits beyond stoic determination, which quickly grows stale. Compared to Devil May Cry, one of Ninja Gaiden's clear inspirations, Ryo just doesn't hold up. Say what you will about Devil May Cry's over-the-top acting, at least it gave the characters flair and made the cutscenes entertaining in a so bad it's good way. Ninja Gaiden's story on the other hand may be visually stylish, but it lacks substance. Rachel unfortunately fares even worse. She comes off as generic eye candy and constantly needs saving. After you rescue her, she often just disappears from the story again. I never felt any attachment to her, nor did I care what happened to her next. To be fair, the story isn't outright bad. It does function well enough to justify Ryo's journey and the progression from one area to the next. But as a narrative experience, it's bland and forgettable. When compared to standout action games like Devil May Cry 3 or Bayonetta, Ninja Gaiden falls far short. In fact, its storytelling feels closer to the notoriously weak Devil May Cry 2, which left me equally unimpressed. One thing I definitely didn't expect going into Ninja Gaiden was just how interconnected the world would be. Unlike the more linear structure of Devil May Cry, this game builds on that formula with a world that actually feels connected. A dark, decaying world that used to be whole and now feels like it's falling apart. It's a really cool twist that makes it feel like a believable world. But that doesn't mean everything in this world is great. For instance, chapter 6, the part where you have to scale a tower while being constantly bombarded with arrows. I used up nearly all my potions just trying to stay alive because I kept getting knocked down again and again. It's hands down one of the most frustrating sections in the entire game. And that frustration bleeds right into what I'd say is the game's biggest flaw, the forced platforming. Yes, Ryu is more mobile than Dante was in the original Devil May Cry, but that doesn't save it. The platforming just feels clunky and awkward, mostly because the camera is working against you half of the time, making it hard to judge jumps or see where you're going. The swimming controls aren't much better. They're stiff, floaty and not fun to deal with. Now, credit where it's due, I really admire how ambitious the game is. It throws in puzzles, platforming, swimming and combat, all in one package. But aside from a few moments, most of those side mechanics don't land. The puzzles are bland, the platforming is frustrating and swimming is, let's say, forgettable. Thankfully, the combat is where Ninja Gaiden truly shines. That said, there are still some weird design choices, like how certain upgrades, such as art scrolls, can only be bought during specific chapters. For example, there's one sold by Muramasa in chapter 6, but if you miss it, too bad. You can't get it later, even though Muramasa is still around. It just doesn't make sense and adds unnecessary restriction. Enemy design though, fantastic. It's straight out of the old NES playbook. Aggressive, relentless and totally unforgiving. Enemies won't wait for you to make a move, so you constantly have to watch out for incoming attacks. Even basic encounters require full attention, and that keeps the tension high. It makes every battle feel intense. Now I'm not gonna lie, the controls took me a while to get used to. There's a steep learning curve, and early on every fight felt like a boss battle. But once I got into the rhythm of the game, things really clicked. And when you finally start clearing rooms without getting hit, or take down a tough enemy with pure skill, it's incredibly rewarding. The challenge hurts, but in a good way. As for the bosses, they're hit or miss. Some are solid, but a lot of them just feel repetitive. There's even a fight against 2 tanks, and later on a helicopter. And yeah, that gave me serious Devil May Cry 2 flashbacks, and not in a good way. The real standout fights are against other human or humanoid characters, Morai, Toku and Fiend Morai. Those are awesome. The rest, pretty forgettable or just plain annoying. Speaking of annoying, the ghost fish in chapter 14. I hate them. I have no idea why the developers thought it would be a good idea to put these in the game. If you don't grab the serpent statue after the second Elma fight, you have to backtrack all the way to the pyramid. And that means making your way across tons of ghost fish, easily the most irritating enemies in the game. Another gripe, the lack of a proper lock-on feature. Just like in the original Devil May Cry, you can't lock onto specific enemies, which becomes a problem when you're surrounded. And on top of that, you can't switch weapons on the fly. You have to go into the menu every time. It's not game breaking, but it's annoying enough that I usually just stuck with one weapon to avoid the hassle. A smoother, seamless system would have made the experience even better. Also, the high score system feels kind of pointless. It's there, sure, but there's no real reward for doing well. It would have been great to get some kind of bonus or unlockable for hitting high ranks, but instead it's just a number. Still, despite all that, these issues don't ruin the game. One of the most satisfying parts of Ninja Gaiden is how you gradually learn the layout of the world. Areas that felt like a confusing maze at first eventually become second nature. Yeah, there's a fair bit of backtracking, which I'm not a big fan of, but overall the sense of exploration and mastery is really rewarding. And we can't wrap this up without talking about the visuals. For a game released in 2004 on the original Xbox, Ninja Gaiden is an absolute technical marvel. The environments, animations and character designs are just gorgeous. Even today, it holds up surprisingly well. In conclusion, Ninja Gaiden is a bit of a mixed bag. On one hand, the combat is absolutely phenomenal, fast, fluid and deep, with enough variety to let you develop your own personal playstyle. Overcoming the game's intense encounters feels incredibly rewarding, and in those moments it truly shines. But on the other hand, it's held back by some frustrating elements. The clunky platforming, forgettable story, repetitive boss fights, looking at you giant worms, and of course the infamous ghost fish, all chip away at the experience. Still, there's no denying this is a technical and visual showcase, so much so that it looks and feels like an early Xbox 360 title, not something that dropped in 2004 on the original Xbox. That in itself is impressive. As for whether this is a faithful leap from the 2D Ninja Gaiden games into 3D, I'd say yes. Team Ninja did a great job capturing the spirit of the originals, the punishing difficulty, the fast-paced action and the relentless enemy design. And just like the classic NES titles, this version isn't perfect, but it's bold, challenging and memorable. So would I recommend it? Absolutely. If you're a fan of high-skill action games like Bayonetta or Devil May Cry, this is a must-play. But if you're not up for a serious challenge, you might want to look elsewhere. That said, if you do want to jump in, I highly recommend skipping the base version and going straight to Ninja Gaiden Black. It tightens up the experience and adds a lot of meaningful improvements. And in my next review, I'll be diving into Ninja Gaiden Black to see exactly how it builds on this foundation.